the excuses we've heard, because they've been rebutted so well, for the public education system's abject failure. We've heard in the past, give us more money and we'll do a better job. And we're having a difficult time because of the private school drain on public education. Hawaii does not have the highest percentage of students in private schools. We're ranked 12th. So bye-bye that lame excuse. Poverty. The percentage of poor students in Hawaii is lower than the national average. Bye-bye that lame excuse. Special education. The percentage of special education needs students in Hawaii is lower than the national average. So we can bid adieu for that excuse. Ethnic diversity, that's often used. You know, we have such a diverse culture. We do. That's oftentimes an insult to minority groups. I know, for instance, the Portuguese do very well in public schools. So, thank you for laughing, good senator. Got one laugh. But that's a lame excuse too, because we all know that there are other states with much more problematic ethnic groups that are doing better. Educational funding, Hawaii's per pupil spending, and average teacher and principal salaries are all.
Unemployment insurance benefits be impacted.
Purely the decision on the part of the individuals who are very
benefits.
People that are running for higher office or have other motives will stand up and by the fact that a lot of schools are good and they're not all bad. A lot of kids.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, members? If not, let's.
Are not. And I feel so sorry for those parents, and I feel so sorry for those children for several generations now that have a diploma from the public education system and can barely read it. When are we going to stop funding this huge, huge problem? When are we going to reorganize the Department of Education and put the resources in the classroom with the teachers and the students? Until we do that, we're going to continue to have these endless debates in the legislature on how to fund a failing system and try to fool the people in Hawaii to thinking we're fixing the problem by throwing their hard-earned money at it. I would urge my colleagues to hold them accountable. Something was mentioned about collective bargaining, and I will say this again for purposes of that issue pertaining to budget items. We should not rubber stamp collective bargaining agreements by simply funding them like it's some sort of mandate. I would remind everyone on this floor, we're the elected officials. I would remind everybody in the floor that we have a state constitution that says we make the laws, that we make the budget, that we appropriate the money, not collective bargainers and union people whose only interest is to fatten their own interest at the expense of children and taxpayers. This bill is going to probably pass, as many have this morning. It's not hard to keep the box score here, 23-2. But I'll let you stand on your record, majority party. And I'd love to hear some people rebut me and tell me what a wonderful job the DOE is doing, and what a wonderful job the Board of Education is doing, what a wonderful job those caring HSTA union leaders are doing. These are the very people that say we're keeping our kids out of school. Shame on us by not throwing more money at their cause when they themselves went on strike in the earlier part of this millennium and kept kids out of school for 21 days. Oh, but shucks, we forgot that one, didn't we? Madam President, sooner or later, this legislature is going to have to come to grips with this. And maybe the silver lining to the dark economic clouds that hover over this state is it will be sooner, because we can't afford to continue like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Galatario.
Thank you, Madam President. I speak in strong support
Please proceed.
of this measure. First of all, I'd like to, in many ways, agree, colleagues, with those past two speakers who articulated so well and illustrated points of value, but I believe that their particular position is totally misdirected towards this measure. Firstly, my bottom line position on this, and I'm sure it illustrates the last two speakers as well as the chamber, our keiki must receive quality education. What went down last year through furloughs led our children to receive the most meager education in our nation, colleagues. Now, this continuing episode continues to bring shame on us as a state, as well as punishes our children by making them inadvertent casualties to our economic woes. Now, we can qualify and quantify and ponder and about the difference between quantity and quality of education, but at the end of the day, it's our keikis who are being shortchanged. 17 days is 17 days is 17 days. There's no other way to cut it. Now, some protest the use of the hurricane fund, obviously, and their points are well taken, but this will provide a course to remedy the problem, even if temporarily. And if you ask our junior and senior high school students and their parents as well, if they need temporary relief, most will say they concur. The reason I don't say all is because some people are getting used to furloughs. That's unfortunate, but it's the truth. These kids are on their way to college. We're trying to save 6 more days. But time is running out. And in the spirit of full disclosure, colleagues, I'm a parent of a senior at McKinley who asks me constantly, how come, Dad, why aren't you giving us our full measure of education? We'll never know her full potential because we're not providing her with what we as students had in high school, and hopefully what we can provide for those following this year. Ask the parents of the elementary schools, those students. They know what's happening and they're not pleased either. Above and beyond the educational system, colleagues, we're creating a whole new generation of latchkey kids. Unacceptable. So, colleagues, I ask for your favorable consideration of this measure. We will address some of the concerns of the past two speakers in some other bills that are forthcoming, but for now, the public is paying attention. They're expecting a solution. Thank you, and thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sakamoto,
Thank you. Some rebuttal remarks.
please proceed.
And I agree with the previous speaker. This is about the students and the kids. This is not about the adults arguing what could, should be. But in response to some of the comments, this body has bills before us today dealing with instructional days, more time, common curriculum, the Teacher Standards Board, junior kindergarten, principal and vice principal certification, longitudinal data, many things, in addition to Board of Education changes. So we're trying to do our part, and yes, There's a lot that needs to be done. But let's not hold the kids, penalize the kids as that debate goes on. We need to do this, and we hope, I pray, that our administration and the respective teachers and other bargaining units can use this measure and other things to move us forward and resolve this as soon as possible for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Hemmings.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in quick rebuttal. If this really was about quote-unquote the keikis, then the teachers and the unions and all of those organizations would have found a way not to have furlough days. They simply could have used vacation days, they could have used teacher enrichment days, and all the other fancy names they have for not doing work and collecting a big paycheck.
Any further discussion? Senator Baker.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in strong support of this measure.
Please proceed.
Madam President, I have some remarks I'd like to have inserted, but I just want to say one thing to all of my colleagues here. It really is about the kids. I remember standing on a picket line with teachers, with parents, and some young children, and this one student had a sign that said, and she had actually a little jingle. I don't remember the whole gist of it, but the upshot of what she was saying was, we don't want more vacation. We want our education. And to have a little third grader who's, lost a few teeth, and she really understands what maybe some of us adults don't get. It really is about time in the classroom, quality time in the classroom, and that's what we're trying to give with this measure. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Your comments are ordered into the journal. Senator Hoosier.
Yeah, Madam President, I rise in support of this measure.
Please proceed.
Colleagues, I also am basically enthusiastically supporting this measure. There are parts of it that I have a problem with, but my vote will be in support. I think it's too little, too late. For the record, the majority of the Senate stood up late October, November, and said clearly that the furlough solution is unacceptable, and that we proposed taking money from one of the special funds, a hurricane fund or otherwise, and restoring at least the rest of this year wholly. And I'm very proud to be part of that group in the majority that wanted to do that. Shortly thereafter, the House essentially concurred, and then the governor finally said, well, yes, maybe if we can get agreement, we'll do that too. And it's unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate. The word will come to me, but it's very, very bad. The governor has not been able to come to terms with this. And we frankly don't have the power to negotiate by Constitution. We don't have a power to cut the deal, and that's where my objections, my concerns, my reservations to this measure comes from, is the provisions within this that require teachers to give up a certain number of planning days in return for the furlough days. I don't support that. I believe we should leave that to negotiations. But that is up to the governor, and I would say that in that respect there's been a total absence of leadership on the part of the governor. There is no leadership, and while we try as a legislative body to exert leadership, it's like pushing on a string, which is very, very frustrating. The failure of leadership. Recently, the governor, as a symbol of the kind of leadership that's being utilized, accused the Hawaii State Teachers Association about caring more about the money than they do about the children. I would say that's a pot calling the kettle black. Actually, I think there are far too many people who care more about the money than they do about the children. As mentioned earlier, there are a growing number of latchkey children. I know families personally who 11-year-old children are watching 7-year-old children while mom and dad are at work. We had a tsunami warning. Could have been a disaster on Saturday. And fortunately, that earthquake originated in Chile and not on the Big Island. If that had originated here locally, we would not have had the warning we had, and those children would be stuck alone in their homes on a Furlough Friday when a major disaster could occur. There is no question that the current budget crisis is a temporary crisis, while the impacts of Furlough Fridays could last a lifetime. We trust teachers with our children. We trust them to mold their brains, their personalities, their lives, and their futures. For some, that is the only positive role model that these students have, is their teacher. But now they're stuck home without that role model. Sometimes it's the only place they get a decent meal. Sometimes that's the only safe place they have to go. And now they're without that. Some want to blame the teachers. But I don't blame the teachers. If I was them, I'd feel the same way. Working 12 hours a day, hot, crowded classrooms, taking money out of pocket, only to get bashed over and over again, sometimes by politicians, oftentimes by columnists in the media, trying to do their best, dealing with parents and community who expect miracles. And they're getting better, actually, Madam President, colleagues. If you look at the test scores are improving, but they don't get any kudos, they don't get any congratulations, they don't get any more support. All they do is get criticized and put down. More top-down directions, more forms to fill out, more IEPs, more directives. We take away their health care system, then we give it back to them, but then not really. It's only a year, it's only 2 years. We give them planning days, then we take the planning days back from them. They're some of the most important people in our community, and we end up dumping on them over and over again. We need to support our teachers. We need to pay them what they deserve. We need to provide them the support and the planning and the respect they deserve, and let them do their jobs. To punish our children because we're mad at the Department of Education is just totally beyond me. I also agree and have supported bills to audit the Department of Education. I agree we could do better. I agree they could function much better. But you don't hear from anyone on this floor today. You certainly don't hear from the minority party talking about the $1 billion the administration has locked up in a Ponzi scheme that we can't get to. They call it auction rate securities. But to me, it's no different than a Ponzi scheme. It paid way higher than normal rates of interest. You buy it, and then you sell it. You get your money back when the next investor buys in a month or two later. We have $1 billion. I don't hear any criticism, any demands for audits of the administration for that. We have $250 million tied up in special funds, and yet our kids aren't going to school. We have a failure of leadership, and it's time that we move on. And I believe that this legislature, this Senate, by passing this measure, will send a statement that our children, their education is important to us. And it's not just about teachers. I suppose we have not heard the rest of the discussion today, but I'm sure there will be much more bashing of public workers. There'll be bashing of cafeteria workers, custodians, clerks. All of those people are essential to running our schools. We need nurses. We need to fund the schools properly. This budget crisis is a temporary situation, but again, the damage is permanent. There's much bandying about of statistics earlier, Madam President. Our teachers entry-level teachers get paid less than $40,000 a year. When you figure in the cost of living, we're at the bottom in terms of the comfort score that organizations that rank teachers by state calculate. We need to take action. We need to stop blaming the DOE and punishing our kids because we're not happy with the system. We need to ask the governor to put aside the ego and to sit down with the HSTA, the BOE, and the DOE, take a big deep breath, and put our kids back to school. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Nishihara.
I share the concerns of the previous speakers. However, this measure will not correct the system's failure, but it will not further penalize students.
Senator Nishihara, for what purpose?
I'll be voting in favor of the measure. Sorry.
Please proceed.
As a former teacher and administrator, I would not have chosen the path that led us here. But at this point in time, those larger questions and concerns need to be more thoughtfully carried out outside of this body with a larger discussion that involves all of our community. I will vote in support of this measure and ask others to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Chen Oakland.
Thank you, Madam President. I also stand in support of this measure.
Please proceed.
As a proud public school graduate and mother of public school children, I echo the sentiments of the Kauai senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Espero.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to rise in support of this measure.
Please proceed.
I just want to reiterate my support for this measure and for all those who have spoken. As was stated, in October, a group of parents and students came up in our rotunda and advocated against Friday furloughs almost 5 months ago. Many of us wanted to have a special session before December. We wanted to be taking a vote similar to this one in 2009. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get to that point. And now, 5 months later, and many school days and hours of loss of classroom instruction, we are in a position to correct a situation which never should have occurred. Other countries have 240 days, 220 days, 200 days. We have 161 days, the lowest in the nation, probably one of the lowest in the industrial world. We saw the attention in the media, not only nationally but internationally. We heard from President Obama and his education secretary. We were not directly responsible for this situation, but we could have resolved it in 2009. We did not. We are now taking it up. This is obviously the right thing to do. We cannot no longer jeopardize our children's future, their education. This is unacceptable to allow these Friday furloughs to continue. And I want to thank the WAM chair and everybody who worked on this bill to get this through, end Friday furloughs, get our students educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator He.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise with reservations.
Please proceed.
This bill should be tied to an audit of the Department of Education. This is like giving a diabetic candy and rewarding the diabetic for having a sugar fix that's wrecking the diabetic's life. The fact of the matter is the Department of Education does not have change agents. The Board of Education couldn't care less about change agents. The Board of Education is complicit with the teachers. The Superintendent of Education is complicit with HSTA. They can't remember if they represent the employer or the employee. The governor understands she's the employer, but the four-legged stool has 3 employees and 1 employer when it should be the other way around. The interim superintendent indicated that closing schools wouldn't save enough money. She's wrong. Anybody, anytime, can take the DOE handbook, divide the number of teachers into the number of students, and you will come out with 1 to 15. The student-teacher ratio is 1 to 26.1. I can hear the defenders now. Well, the reason is because special ed is 1 to 1. That's correct. But surely, is there anyone with a reasonable amount of sanity that could not assert that teachers should be redeployed to save taxpayers money and to move the student-teacher ratio closer to where it belongs? Any school, any district. And I regret that I don't have the book with me. Divide the number of teachers into the number of students. If it's at the elementary level, it's closer to 1 to 13. If it's at the intermediate level, it's 1 to 15. If it's at the high school level, it's closer to 1 to 16. So where did all the teachers go? Well, there's a high school in my district at one time had 2.5 athletic directors. 2.5 athletic directors. Not too many championship teams, but 2.5 athletic directors. Maybe they need 3.5 athletic directors. Maybe that's the problem. It's not the 2.5, it should be a 3.5. The fact of the matter is the Department of Education needs change agents, not defenders of the status quo. Uh-oh. I sound like somebody who might be making sense. It's easy to stand up here and say, well, geez, we support this bill because it's the teachers. I used to be a teacher. I taught at 5 elementary schools on Molokai. I taught at Kailua High School, Kalaheo High School, Molokai High School, Windward Community College, Maui Community College, the Community College of Micronesia. That's how desperate I was to get a job. This is like giving candy to a diabetic. Real simple. But if you want to put a stick on that candy, then attach an audit to the Department of Education so that change can be expected along with the sugar. The time has long passed for an audit of the Department of Education, and there's no better reason than now to do so. But unless that four-legged stool changes to how it should be, 3 employers and 1 employee, the tail, as stubby as it is, will continue to wag the dog. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator Sloan.
Thank you, Madam President. Brief rebuttal.
Please proceed.
In opposition. Thank you. I do appreciate the comments of the last speaker. I think he's absolutely correct. Change agents, that's what it's all about. As I mentioned initially, all we're doing is throwing money at a problem which my colleague from Waikiki is quite correct, has gotten us national and international shame. But there's no solution here. All there is more money. There's no solution. If this bill said, and we're going to transfer this money and this is what's going to happen or this is what's going to change, then we could support it perhaps. But there's none of that. And for all of these speeches about how we love the keiki and how we're going to improve things and save them and give them food and give them sustenance, and oh, by the way, I learned that the tsunami came on Saturday and Friday in certain districts, but not on Saturday. For all of that discussion, it's not in this bill. All we're doing is transferring money out, and we're giving more money. Nobody has stood up here and bashed teachers or bashed public employees, as so often is the subject of a speech here. We respect these professions. We want them to be adequately paid. We want them to have adequate benefits and health and safety and all of that. That's not in this bill. All this bill is doing is taking more money and giving it to the same people with the same low expectations and benchmarks. And this idea of the DOE, of an audit, you know, people from the outside really don't understand why the legislature for so long has dug in its heels and said, yeah, well, we'll audit everybody else, but not the DOE, not the single source, the largest source of general fund monies, not the largest expectation for education of our children. We won't do it. We don't care how they spend the money, and they don't know, because we've had hearing after hearing, we've had investigations, and we've asked them, and they don't know. So how could we, in acting prudently, say, well, we understand all that, so let's give them more money? As a diabetic, I would welcome the sugar without the stick, but that's another issue. And I know this is a wonderful opportunity for those people that want to bash the governor to continue doing that, but that's not the issue either. The issue is a mistake was made on furloughs. We should end the furloughs. All of us should be together on that, but it should not be dependent on another 86 million or 150 million or 300 million. We need those change agents, and we have the ability and the clout to demand them, but only a few of us in this body seem to think that that's important enough and that's the right direction. So again, I say, Madam President, I'm opposing this bill because unless and until we make these systemic changes, we are not going to progress. And maybe that's why the acting superintendent of education has her children in private schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
Reservations for me?
Reservation for Senator Ihara, reservation for Senator He. No votes for Senator Hemmings and Sloan, and
Reservations.
reservation for Senator Gabbard. Reservations for Senator Bunda. So let me go back. Reservations, Senator He, Senator Gabbard, Senator Bunda, and Senator Ihara. Correct? No votes for Senator Sloan and Senator Hemmings. All others in the affirmative.
23 ayes, 2 noes.
Senate Bill number 2124, SD 2, passes third reading. Members, the chair is going to call for a recess for lunch. Lunch is being served in the Majority Caucus room. We will reconvene at 12:20. Members, 12:20. We still have about 15 more pages to go. So 12:20, members. So recess subject to the call of the chair.